I had a lovely coaching intake yesterday, and one of the primary questions that came up was whether acquiring more information and answering more questions, more logical, mental questions about spirituality was a hindrance in making progress on a path of self-realization. My name is Pablo. This channel is Meditation Amsterdam, and in today's video we're going to talk about whether the thinking mind can be used in our spiritual progress. If you think that these are cool topics, then do subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share with anyone that you think might benefit from the content. So this is a very common topic of discussion, and in spiritual circles it's very often the case that we make an enemy out of our ego, and that we come utterly suspicious about the thinking mind, because the thinking mind is the part of the mind or the mode of the mind that gets us into egoic trouble in the first place. Now, all this is very valid, and yet we then run into a very interesting question, which is how to proceed from there. Do we then want to have a contentious relationship to our thoughts and to our thinking mind? Do we want to ignore it altogether and space out into some sort of vague mode of mind in which logic and reason and words do not apply at all? What to do about it, and can it be a hindrance, or could it potentially be of help? And in today's video, I want to discuss how the thinking mind can actually be of help in creating the right conditions for your self-realization and your self-cultivation to develop to a fairly high level before it becomes a real hindrance. Now, to do this, we need to consider what the thinking part of the mind is all about. It is essentially a tool. It is a tool for making logical distinctions and connections. It is a tool for planning, and for a big part, or a big part of its function, is a defensive function. So it wants to preserve our physical integrity in relationship to the environment. These functions will not ever change. They are the primary feature, or the primary purpose of that part of the mind. And it is true that these are the very features that get us away from what is the end goal or direction in which we want to go when it comes to self-cultivation. However, the reason that these functions are getting in the way is because they have a tendency to entirely co-opt our awareness. In other words, when we begin the journey of cultivation, our entire awareness is co-opted and identified with these activities of the mind. And therefore, we don't only have a tool for logic, planning, problem solving, and defense. We are a tool that does those things. Our awareness is completely engrossed in those activities. And over time, what we begin to do is we begin to decouple our awareness from the activities and the goals of the thinking part of the mind, so that we can have a broader sense of self, which, instead of being used by those modules and those goals, is actually using them as part of a broader picture that we are. So in order to do that, there's plenty of work that needs to be done. And what I would submit to you is that it is very difficult to embark on the kind of work that we need to do for self-realization and cultivation without having a logical framework of why we would be doing it. In other words, especially in the West, where we don't really believe in gurus and we don't take the path of faith and trust in a certain spiritual lineage, for example, we need to have plausible and logical answers that explain why we should be bothering to do this kind of work, and to essentially not get in the way once we embark into that kind of work. Without that, it is very difficult for us to start doing practices that are difficult usually emotionally painful, require a lot of consistency, without a plausible answer for why we're doing that, and a kind of bridge or a sort of progression that we can see and how our minds will develop to make that identity flip happen at some point. So the thinking mind can help us understand what these practices are about. It will not be the part of the mind that execute those practices, but it will, in understanding them, perhaps muster the kind of commitment that we need, create the space, and in being satisfied, it can be laid to rest, at least during the periods in which we are doing meditation or practices of the kind. So plausible answers for our thinking mind give us enough understanding to embark on the journey, and it also makes it so that the mind can be restful enough to at least not get too much in the way while we're doing these practices, as opposed to constantly craving for answers and creating doubt that becomes a real hindrance in putting in the time and the effort that we need, and also putting in the focus that we need. As we spoke about in previous videos, we need to focus on our somatics, on emotions, we need to focus on our perceptual reality. And those are difficult things to do when, on top of the normal overthinking and planning activities of the mind, now the mind has 1,000 questions about why we're doing these practices as well. Especially because these practices are not direct, they are not linear, they are indirect, and they are difficult to directly tie into the result that we're trying to create. So there needs to be a plausible link between the practices, the effort, and the results that we're cultivating. Without that, it is very unlikely that we will embark in the journey and have enough focus and stability during the journey to see it through. So the mind's activity of logic will not get us there, but it can be co-opted to create the right conditions and to create the right effort and the right consistency behind the practice, because it understands why it's doing it. This is not too different from going to the gym, for example. When we go to the gym, we're going to put ourselves through effort, we're going to put ourselves through pain, and we're going to try to create this consistency for a certain health that we want to create in our bodies over time. Now, if somebody with no understanding of exercise whatsoever was asked to do this for a long time and go through all the pain, the thinking mind is going to go, why the hell am I doing this? There seems to be no plausible reason whatsoever. I don't know why I'm doing it. I have not seen the connection between doing this and whatever result is out there, and therefore I'm disconnecting and disengaging from this entire thing. So the thinking mind can be an excellent vehicle to set up certain conditions, and we co-opt the activity of the thinking mind for the purpose of not destroying the thinking mind, but placing it eventually in the context of a broader identity that we're trying to cultivate for ourselves, in which the thinking activities of the mind are not the primary identity that we have, and they don't hijack the entire use of our awareness, but they sit as a tool within a much broader mental landscape that we now cultivated for ourselves. So I hope that gives you a little bit of context. I hope it resolves the apparent paradox of whether to use the thinking mind or not, whether to study spiritual subjects, but also how far to go with that, and understanding that those activities of the mind do not create the results, but they can definitely facilitate the results. And we don't have to have a contentious relationship with the thinking mind, but rather learn how to co-opt it as a tool that can drive us further in our self-cultivation journey. I hope that helps, and I'll be back with more as usual. Cheers.